everybody! Welcome back to Movie Night, and now that we have covered the most influential horror movies, I mean, I know I didn't hit them all, but I did 55, and oh boy, that took a while to sort through. Now that we've finished all of that, we can actually start talking about the kinds of horror movies, or the subgenres. There are actually quite a few, but before we even tackle these subgenres of horror movie, we first need to discuss why do people even like horror movies? I mean, they feature awful things, monsters and death and pain and scary stuff. So why do people like watching them at all? Well, it's basically psychology. To give the simplest overview, it is a controlled reaction of your fight or flight nervous response. You see, some psychologists posit that we are no longer under as much threat as we were back in the caveman days when we were hunter-gatherers being chased by wolves. So we have all of these nervous responses to danger that just don't get triggered anymore, unless you are supremely unlucky. So horror movies is an outlet to feel that rush of adrenaline, same as bungee jumping or skydiving is. However, that does actually have some level of risk. You know, the harness could fail, or you could crash a car if you're a race car driver. Thank you for proving my point. But while doing adrenaline rush activities like race car driving, there is some level of threat still. You can crash your car, your harness may break when you're bungee jumping. So horror movies are a definitely safer way to still feel that fight or flight reaction, but you definitely know you're not going to die just by watching something unless you have a heart attack due to the stress of it, which has actually happened. We've had people have major stress reactions due to horror movies, like The Exorcist. People were passing out in the aisles. While I don't believe anyone has died of fright from watching a horror movie, there are other things like sleep deprivation and the hallucinations that come from that have led to some, if not fatalities, then definitely some major health issues. So watching a horror movie gives you this adrenaline rush, but why do people even care about that? Is it, as the psychologists say, that we're hardwired to be able to run from the wolves, and so there's an innate part of our psychology that isn't being used anymore? Well, maybe. Well, in my mind, it goes back to catharsis, which is a common term, cathartic release, and it's something that we talk about a lot in theater. It goes all the way back to the Greeks. They said at the end of tragedies that there is a moment of catharsis where your feelings and emotions are released at the climax of a good story, and you just feel better. Like the zen you get in after a really hard workout, or after you've done a really good cry. Of course, there are other reasons that psychologists and people think that horror movies are popular, but it really doesn't play into the horror aspect, or just the movie. If you're watching a really bad horror movie, like so bad it's funny, there's a bit of a reassurance that you're going to be okay. I mean, if this monster can't kill these idiot teenagers, then if there is a monster out there or something bad, you'll probably do okay. The monster under your bed isn't so scary when you know that it's very incompetent. And on the other hand, really good horror movies scratch that cinephile part of your brain where you can recognize and adore the good camera work, good makeup, good CGI, the good acting, just the general scary, creepy mood and tone. Things like that make watching a good horror movie really rewarding in the same way that walking through an art museum is. You're seeing masterpieces. Well, now that we've gone over some of the psychology as to why people like horror movies, let's get into the subgenres of horror, and there are a lot. If you do a little research on the internet, you'll find that there are 5 main categories and tons and tons and tons of subcategories, or I guess sub-subcategories. So I'll tell you the main 5 and the 2 outliers. So going into the 5 main subcategories of horror, they are gore, psychological, killer, monster, and paranormal. And then the 2 subcategories, or I guess outliers is a better term, are found footage and comedy horror. And taking all of these into account, these 7, I like to define them into 2 main groups, the plausible and the non-plausible, meaning things that can happen and things that cannot happen. And in today's video, we will talk about the non-plausible plots, the things that will never happen, at all, ever. Before we get into that, let's take a brief moment to talk about those outlier genres, because we're really not going to be able to discuss them a lot. So starting with found footage, it has an interesting position of, because it's found footage, it has an air of reality to it. You know, we found this film in an abandoned car or based on true events. Things like that make people instantly start to think, well, what if this is real? Which would put it into the plausible category. Yet the majority of the plots in found footage films, and I would say in most horror films, are non-plausible. Blair Witch, Cloverfield. They fall into the supernatural and the monster category respectively. So that kind of blurs together the lines of what is plausible and not plausible. Paired with the fact that found footage films aren't too common, that's why they are an outlier. And then we have comedy horror like Shaun of the Dead, Cabin in the Woods, and Scream. And as I like to think, Evil Dead, because I find that movie to be hilarious. This goes back to that psychological feeling of safety due to the fact that what you're seeing on screen is incredibly inefficient horror. Either the monster is an idiot and cannot kill these people, or the people just act so surreally to the situation, like Shaun of the Dead. It's a zombie apocalypse, but they just decide to go to a pub and, you know, have a beer and wait the whole thing out in a very comic style that for some reason works. So we could take this with a lighter air because the people in it aren't taking it too seriously. They aren't treating it with the gravity that it actually deserves. They are not treating this horrible, horrific monster whatever scenario as an actual horrific, horrible monster whatever scenario. So we can take another step back when we're watching it and realize it's fake, and we have a little less grounding of empathy and fight or flight, adrenaline. You just don't feel like it's happening to you because it's obviously a fake show just meant to get some laughs. So let's get into the two subgenres that fit into the non-plausible category, and they are paranormal, also known as supernatural, I'll probably use the word interchangeably, and monster. Of course, I can just lecture at the camera about these subgenres and what movies fall into them and what that means to the film industry, or we can just voice over it over a Halloween makeup look, because why not? We're like 2 weeks out from Halloween and I want to build up some extra costumes for the non-parties that I will not be going to because of plague. Hi, I'm down here now, and I really hope that this janky camera setup does not fail because my camera will crash onto my face. So, I'm going to be making some polymorph teeth. And if you don't know what polymorph is, it's this stuff. It's these little plastic pellets that you put in hot water and then they become clear and you can mold them. I have used them a lot. Here's a little bird skull I made once. Focus camera. Thank you, camera. I also used them to make button eyes because I was the other mother once for Halloween. So I'm going to use them to make some Pennywise teeth, because if you guys have this stuff, you can make anything really quickly. So I'm just going to show, oh, I spilled them everywhere. I'm just going to show a time lapse of me making the teeth and then just doing some Pennywise, like red eyeshadow, the red lines, red lipstick, while we finish talking about these horror genres. My camera did fall and I was afraid it had broken everything. Oh, please, 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 please. Okay, sweet, wonderful. Just a slight bit of advice. This is gonna be really hot water we're dealing with, so please be careful. That was probably way too much. Don't mind me while I break for tea. All right, so that melted really quickly. Ooh, it's clear now. See that? See that, everybody? See how it's clear? And it's really hot, so please, please, God Almighty, be careful. Hot, 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 hot. Okay. I'm just working with my hands to get it to cool down a tad, because this is gonna go in my mouth. All right, so I can't remember if I've made teeth before, but I feel like I have made teeth before. We interrupt this lecture that I don't think I've even started yet to bring you how to make teeth. Okay, they're starting to harden. All right, so do not want to burn myself. Hi again. So you're gonna take your little plastic worm and you're going to shove it on your teeth, and then you're going to let it harden, and then you can pop it off and it'll be like formed to your mouth. Hi, I'm in the frame. So yeah, let's do that. See how it's already whiter than this one? Because this one's getting harder. It's really creepy, but it actually doesn't affect my talking that much. The CH sounds are a little hard, but you know what? We're just gonna do. Alright, so once these are cooled, we're actually gonna start working on the teeth. I will see you then. So what you do is you take a small piece of plastic, you kind of make it in like a candy corn shape, stick one end to your denture, flatten it out, you have a tooth. You really don't have, you can't kind of do them in bulk and then shove them on this way because you want them to bond to your denture, and they will harden too fast for that to work. If you were doing like you just needed teeth and say you could put them in liquid latex, then yeah, you can make a whole bunch of teeth at once. But you unfortunately can't do that for this method. This may end up looking more like shark teeth than Pennywise teeth because he has like 10 freaking thousand. And I want to be able to actually close my mouth without killing my upper palate. If any of the teeth refuse to stick, just stick the flatter end in some hot water until it's malleable, and then you can stick it back on. Oh, I did make teeth before. I made a look where like a dog had ripped off half of my face, or like a werewolf or something, so I needed to make some teeth so that it looked like there was someone peering in and you could see my teeth through like a ripped cheek. So I have made teeth before. I had forgotten. Hot water will also cool, you can't see. Hi, your hot water will also cool down because you've been putting things in and out of it and you've been touching it and just, you know, thermodynamics, so you might have to heat up your water. Just stick it in the microwave. I'm realizing now that this is probably incredibly boring to watch because it's just a lot of these things sitting on the table while I reach over and heat up plastic, so I might just skip ahead to the them being done bit. Okay, so they are done. They may be more Wendigo teeth than Pennywise teeth, but we're gonna paint them and then move on. I'm using yellow tooth enamel and red tooth enamel. So yeah, this is specifically called Nicotine and Blood Red, and they're both by Mayron. So let's get going. Tooth enamel sucks. It's really annoying to put on your actual teeth, so putting it on fake teeth is much better. Alright, so the teeth are setting, and I'm gonna be honest, this is not my best work, but it'll do in a pinch. And really, that was just to show you guys how to use polymorph plastic. So now, we're going to Pennywise-ify ourselves, and that requires a costume change and me putting my contacts in. So, be right back. Gray clothes, because his outfit's gray. Also, what is more 80s than a really high turtleneck? All you need to do a low-budget Pennywise is red lipstick, red eyeshadow, some red face paint for the lines, and, you know, red hair doesn't hurt. So now let's go into the further subgenres of the non-plausible horror storylines. And as I said previously, they are monster and paranormal. So starting with paranormal, this is probably the biggest category, since this would include ghosts, demons, curses, witches, haunted houses, and even spider demons from space. Movies that fall into these categories are Paranormal Activity, Insidious, Carrie, The Sixth Sense, The Exorcist, Suspiria, Amityville Horror, Poltergeist, and of course, It. And I'm only naming a few that are in this category. So the paranormal category will feature the survivors or the heroes or whatever you want to call them going up against supernatural monsters, things that do not exist in this world. But the difference between it and the monster category is that usually they're incorporeal, non-flesh and blood. It's a ghost, it's a demon, it's a curse, it's someone with powers. So there's this untangible, you can't beat it because you can't see it or it's so above you, it's from a different dimension, it's a ghost, it's a poltergeist, it's something that you can't even deal with. That's the point of the horror of these movies. You can't deal with it. It's unknown. It's something that you can't fight. You can't punch a ghost. So it has a bit of hopelessness of you being against a unbeatable odd. You're in an unwinnable circumstance. The second subgenre in the non-plausible storyline category is monsters. And these, again, are things that do not exist. Dracula, the Wolfman, etc., etc. Those are from the classic horror movie age. We have the kind of golden age, Nightmare on Elm Street, Alien, and then even in modern times, we're really seeing a surgence of zombies. And yes, zombies are included in the monster category. What's interesting is that you also find sci-fi stuff in this category and quote-unquote natural monsters like Jaws. There's even a whole category of large monsters like Godzilla. And yeah, Godzilla isn't really scary now, but whenever it was first created, it was built as a horror movie. So the crux with this genre is that you are trying to fight something that, once again, it's completely unnatural. It's a monster, but at least in these ones, it's a physical thing that you can punch. Or like in Jeepers Creepers, you can run your car over it, over and over and over again. I would say that these movies have a little bit of the slasher genre embedded in it because these natural or physical monsters, whatever you want to call them, can definitely hurt a person in a different way than a ghost will. There is possession and things flying across the room and all those things, but then with Nightmare on Elm Street or Alien, they're ripping and tearing and eating the victims. So it's a little bit more grounded and realistic in that there's a physical thing that you can touch and it can touch you, as opposed to you're in a room with an invisible entity that wants you dead and it's going to throw all the cutlery at you. And it really comes down to what is scarier, the thing that you can't see and can't touch, or the thing that is physical and you can maybe fight, but that can rip you to shreds. So going on to my final thoughts about the non-plausible category. What I like the most about it is that it's just that. It's not plausible. It's not going to happen. And let me just say briefly that this is my personal opinion about the supernatural and all that stuff. A demon clown isn't about to go and eat my friends. Ghosts aren't going to start killing me. I probably will not be possessed by a demon and crab walk down the stairs. A vampire, sadly, will not crawl through my window. These are fiction, and as such, some part of you will always know that you are safe when viewing this. You could be more removed from the happenings in the movie because they can't happen. Because what you're seeing is impossible, your brain doesn't have an analog to compare to. You don't know what it feels like to be possessed by a ghost. You don't know what it feels like to be sucked dry by a vampire. You don't know what it feels like to turn into a werewolf. You don't know what it feels like to set your class on fire with your brain. So because of this, when you're viewing it, it is more of a fiction. Just like how if you're watching Lord of the Rings, you don't know what it feels like to shoot bow and arrow into an orc, or if you're watching a sci-fi movie, you don't know what it feels like to fly through space at warp speed. You can't visualize what it would be like to go through that. You can't really put yourself in the shoes of the characters because you have nothing to base this off of. And that grants you an extra level of protection. You can still feel your feelings, you can still be unnerved and jump scared and all these things, you can still get your catharsis, but it's just a story to view. The reason that I prefer this is A, fantasy grants the storytellers a greater degree of freedom. They can do whatever they want, they're creating their own world with their own rules, and they can make anything happen because it's not based on the rules of our actual world. This is the same reason that a fantasy movie is fun. You get to see a whole new world with given circumstances and scenarios that don't line up with what you know is true, so you can suspend your disbelief. Because of this, you have an extra feeling of security knowing that no matter how scary what you're seeing is, it will never happen to you, so you are okay. Yeah, let me just cover up everything I'm doing with my mirror, because that is very visually helpful. Oh, I'm freaking doing it again. And speaking of unrealistic things ever being able to happen in real life, let us return to me trying to turn myself into a demonic killer clown from space. Ta-da! The easiest, quickest, cheapest it costume that you can ever ask for. And if you really want to be extra, you can use some tooth enamel to really up the creepy factor, but tooth enamel sucks. It's like concentrated mouthwash, so it burns your skin and also vanishes in like 30 seconds because liquid washes it off. You need to keep your teeth really dry and not mind the whole like wallpaper paste texture, toothpaste flavored gunk sticking to your teeth. But see, it's already gone. Tooth enamel really does suck, but it looks super cool. Hi, Georgie. Ha. Of course, if you don't want to deal with tooth enamel, because as we said, it sucks. Except you can't talk, because these things are too big. Hey guys, how do you do anything with these exercises? Well, that looks stupid. Oh wow, I think I already broke. Okay. Oh, you're kind of hello. Oh, I bet that was lovely. So yes, if you don't want to deal with tooth enamel, you can make some fake teeth. Although I would recommend doing them a little bit more normal size than those because those were difficult to live with. You could just do something like this as your Halloween costume and call it a day and not have to deal with any of the other annoying things, and people will totally understand what you're trying to be. I'm a big proponent of easy costumes, things you just throw together, you don't have to worry about them degrading or getting uncomfortable. And this is coming from someone who has gone to Halloween parties with full faces of FX makeup, full prosthetics that made it so that I couldn't even drink anything. Trust me, the simpler the thing is, the much easier and much more enjoyable your night will be. But rant over, costume bit over, lecture over. I hope you enjoyed this overview of the non-plausible horror storylines. Next week we'll be doing plausible horror storylines, and we'll have another simple Halloween makeup that you can do to attend any sort of gathering that you're doing. Again, trick-or-treating is probably gonna be out of the book. Halloween party is probably gonna be out of the book, unless you're meeting with like 3 to 5 people that you really are close with, family and friends that you know are being safe and aren't sick. That's totally fine. I'm probably going to have 2 of my other grad student friends come over, eat some pumpkin seeds, and watch over the garden wall, and that will be it. So whatever your Halloween plans are, I hope they're going to be safe, and I cannot wait to see you next week for our next movie night. Doing adrenaline rush activities like bungee jumping, skydiving, skydiving,